I'm about to try and do something that should not be possible. Try and set a lap time in the top 1% in the world with the new 2024 Formula 2 cars inside of time trial mode, however I'm on a controller. Is this actually possible? Well, I'm doing this challenge around Austria because if I'm going to get into the top 1%, I'm going to need the track with the smallest amount of corners on the F1 calendar. So one of the best parts about this video is that you're going to see every single bit of progress that I make, because this first lap is quite literally the first ever lap that I've driven with the 2024 version of F2 cars. However, unsurprisingly, that also means that my first laps were going to be an absolute disaster, and through the first corner I just completely ignored the track limits. And then coming into turn 2, I actually lined up the corner pretty well until this happened. Anyway, we'll quickly go through the rest of this first lap because as you can see in the background, it was nothing special. I mean, the only positive that I could have taken from this lap was that I didn't invalidate, but that was until the final corner where I did eventually actually invalidate on the entrance. So this lap put me into the top 98% in the world, however I knew that there was so much time to find. And now we're moving on to what would be the second improvement for me in this challenge, and we're coming into the third corner. I was already half a second up and I knew that in turn 3 I just didn't need to spin. And thankfully I didn't make any mistake on this lap and I instantly gained 5.5 seconds, which I maintained until the end of the lap, and I was now into the top 58% in the world, which is a massive increase. So of course I'm not going to waste your time, and after this I made very crucial improvements 3 times, which were to be honest pretty simple as I was just getting up to speed with these cars. However, I must have been getting up to speed pretty quickly because these 3 laps put me into the top 21% in the world. And I was not stopping there. A while later we're coming into turn 4 and I was slightly down to my delta, but of course there was room for improvement. Going through the corner I really tried to follow the world record holders racing line, which you can see in the yellow telemetry on the surface, which really helped me, and I was now a 10th up coming into the double left-hander. And going through these 2 corners I gained a very small half a tenth, but I knew that every thousandth of a second was going to count when it came to the later laps, and to be honest I was already aiming for this lap to put me into the higher percentages in the world. And it was now time for a double right-hander. Through turn 9 I took a way better line which gained me an entire tenth of a second, and then through the final corner I just carried way higher minimum speed. And this helped me improve by another 10.5, and by the time we get to the finish line I'd managed to gain a massive 4 tenths. So this lap put me into the top 12% in the world, which obviously I didn't know at the time, however trust me, I was absolutely buzzing. And that's because this lap was far from perfect, and I really started to believe that this challenge was truly possible. And not long after this I was about to set another lap time that was going to get me even closer to the top 1% in the world. Coming into turn 1, as always, I was going to try and follow the world record holders line, but what made this corner give me a massive improvement was that I got excellent traction, and finishing the first sector I was already over 2 tenths up. It's now time for turn 3, and at first I didn't even have that bad of a run going through the corner, but so frustratingly I had a massive snap of oversteer on the exit, and as we speed up to turn 4 I was only 0.08 of a second up. Coming into this corner I knew that there was time to find on the exit, and I broke slightly early, which helped me get great rotation and set me up for a really good exit, which would double my gain to the delta by the time we get to turn 6. So we're actually going to skip through turns 6, 7 and 8, because by the time we get to the final 2 corners on this track my gain to the delta was still positive by 1.8 tenths of a second. However, I wasn't really sure if there was any time to find in these 2 corners. First up was the penultimate corner where I clipped the apex, and this put me just over 2 tenths up, and then through turn 10, which was the final corner, I gained another 0.06 of a second. And by the finish line this totaled to a huge quarter of a second worth of improvement, which put me into the top 7% in the world. However, I was becoming slightly worried because apart from a potential improvement at turn 2, I knew that I was going to find it very difficult to gain any time. And unfortunately I was pretty much spot on about this. In the background there is a compilation of me making mistakes on laps when I was positive to the delta, which was just so frustrating. And even more annoyingly, there were multiple times that I was coming into turn 3 comfortably up to the delta, and as I've mentioned before, there was lots of time to find in this corner. However, for some stupid reason I could never quite get the right time to be on the power, which led to me making constant mistakes. And here is my final lap of day 1 trying to complete this challenge. Coming into the final 2 corners I was almost 3 tenths up, which could be huge for my progress. Going through turn 9 I lost around half a tenth, which is absolutely fine, and then through the final corner this happened. Yeah, honestly, this was just so annoying, and to be honest, it kind of summed up my final hour of day 1, so I decided to call it a day. So for the start of day 2, I reminded myself of how far I'd come in this challenge. I'd gone from never driving one of these F2 cars before to getting into the top 7% in the world. And I also knew that the second I make my next improvement, all of the past mistakes would not mean anything. And after only a few laps of warming up on day 2, I was about to make a massive leap for my progress in this challenge. Coming into turn 1, I broke a little early, so obviously I was slightly down to the delta on the entry to the corner, and then on the exit I was was just constantly gaining time all the way up to turn 3. And by the time we made it up to the end of the first sector, I was already an entire tenth of a second up to the delta. So I'll be honest, I was just absolutely desperate to improve going through this turn, and thank God I did. Although I didn't exactly have a great run, I did enough to gain just a little bit of time. And because the time that I found was on the exit of this corner, the delta would keep increasing up to turn 4. Now it's time for the 4th corner, and as always I broke early for rotation. However, I got on the power way too early and I had a snap, which actually meant that I had such a poor exit. So as we come up to the double left-hander, I would only be half a tenth up. And this is where I started to get a little bit desperate, as going through turn 6 I lost even more time by having a bad exit, and I really just didn't want to waste another potential improvement lap. And honestly, because I also didn't make any more progress going through turn 7, I knew that I just had to send it into the final 2 corners. And as promised, I was at full commitment going through this double right-hander, and from these 2 corners alone I managed to gain just over a tenth of a second, which put me into the top 4% in the world. Now of course, this was obviously a huge bit of progress in terms of the challenge. However, mentally it was worth so much more, as I now had belief again that I could get into the top 1% in the world. And at this point in the challenge, I was just carrying so much momentum. Not long after my previous improvement, we're coming into turn 1, and for once I actually broke quite late into a corner, and I left this corner a tenth up. So between turn 1 and turn 4, my gain to the delta didn't really change, so we're going to skip to that corner, and I was certain that in the next few turns there was definitely time to find. So going through this right hand corner, initially nothing changed. However, on the exit, for probably the first time in this challenge, I exited turn 4 in 3rd gear, and this worked out perfectly. And I was now going to come into this double left-hander 2 tenths up. First up was turn 6, and I gained around half a tenth. However, on the exit of turn 7, I was just a little bit too under the limit, which cost me some valuable lap time. And we're now coming into the final 2 corners on this track, and I was just hoping to maintain my gain. And thankfully I did even more than that, because I had such a good exit out of the final corner, and on this lap I gained a huge 2 tenths of a second, and I was now only 1% away from the overall goal. And only a few laps later, I didn't know that I was about to make a huge bit of progress coming into the double right-hander 400ths of a second down. Going through turn 6, I maintained the gap to the delta. However, I knew that the time to find was in turn 7. And I absolutely nailed the exit of this corner, which brought me to 600ths of a second up, and honestly I thought that I was about to complete this challenge. So next up was turn 9, and I actually lost a bit of time going through this corner. However, somehow I gained even more time going through what I thought was impossible to gain through, and it was the final corner, and I finished this lap with 900ths of a second worth of progress. And to be completely honest with you lot, at this point I thought I had genuinely completed the challenge. However, I had sadly not, and I was exactly 1.2 tenths away from the top 1% in the world. So I now knew what I had to do to complete this challenge. However, I wasn't sure if I had the ability to do it. Okay everyone, so basically I have not set the lap time, and we are now in November. By the way, I set the top 2% lap time in September. Yeah, this video didn't exactly go to plan. So for a while now, I've been holding this video back just in case if I ever have no time. However, I still needed to set that lap time that just felt impossible. Well, I've been on holiday this week, and my whole plan that this morning and afternoon, I'm going to just pray that I set a lap time that somehow gets me into the top 1% in the world. Because fortunately for me, the rest of this video has been recorded and edited up until where we are now. I now need to find just below 3 tenths of a second to get into the top 1%, as I have reset my personal best because I really just needed a mental reset. And I'll be totally honest with you, I'm not even sure if this voice recording will ever come out. So if you are watching this now, trust me, you do not want to miss what is going to happen next, and wish me luck.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He always been faking me out. Can't make you.
This is it. This is the lap of the weekend.
Late nights in the middle of June. He always been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. I just wanna know what you're dreaming of when you sleep and smile so comfortable. I just wish that I could give you that look that's perfectly unsaid. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He always
I had done it. After so many failed attempts and bottles, I'd finally set a lap time in the top 1% in the world with 2024 Formula 2 cars. Thank you all so much for watching, and please subscribe because this video literally took me a month and a half to record, and we are so close to 20,000 subscribers, which is my aim for this year.